let me begin by thanking the students of CPS for reclaiming the space of this university for debates for as an ex-student of JNU, as an ex-student of CPS, I feel very proud of what you have done. I wish to particularly compliment you for organizing discussion on this subject, because this is a subject that invites debate among friends. And it has been my old grudge against Indian public life that in India, friends never debate publicly. And I find it such a weakness of India's political culture, public culture. या तो लोग एक दूसरे को गाली देते हैं या एक दूसरे के साथ मिलकर जिंदाबाद मुर्दाबाद करते हैं. That shows something weak about our public culture. A good public culture is where friends engage in public reasoning. You know, the problem with some of our debates is that friends sit down in the room कि यार मुझे पता तो है ये प्रॉब्लम तो है लेकिन ये ना पब्लिक में पोजीशन नहीं लेना चाहिए. I think we should take public positions. Public reasoning is at the heart of democracy. And I see today's discussion as contributing to that act of public reasoning, where friends have different positions and they offer public reasons for that. Publicity of this, making it public and offering reasons, is absolutely critical to making a society. So thank you for organizing this. When I say friends, I do not simply mean social friendship, that I happen to know Professor Harish Wankhede, he's a friend, that Avinash I've known for 20 years, he's a friend. No, it's not just that friendship that I'm talking about. Our society is full of such friendships. It's also friendship because we stand on the same side of the divide when it comes to questions of social justice. We all, and I presume most of us, though everyone need not be the case, most of us stand for annihilation of caste as political agenda of this country. Most of us here stand for recognizing that deep inequality, that one of the most salient vector of inequalities in this country is caste. That it has not disappeared, that therefore affirmative action including reservation is necessary, although that is not sufficient. We need much, much more on that, but reservation being one of those things that is needed. That reservation, the implementation of the reservations has been very faulty, very flawed, very inadequate, and that the political establishment of this country has done whatever it has done grudgingly, against their will. They have been forced to do so, and at the first opportunity they find a way to bypass it. This is the truth, we all know it. And that is the starting point of the discussion today. But there is a difference. Both my friends were very polite not to express that disagreement very sharply. But because they probably know my position, I put it sharply. There is a difference about how, given all these agreements, we perhaps have different reading of the specific judgment of the Supreme Court. It is not so much a difference of the intent of the court. To be absolutely honest, I don't care. Judges के दिमाग में क्या है, क्या सोचते हैं, world view क्या है. Fortunately, it's not Thomas Hobbes's text, which I have to understand text and intent and things like this kind. As far as Supreme Court orders are concerned, My only interest is in the operational order, in the arguments that inform that written or arguments. उनके दिल में क्या है वो अपने दिल में ले जाए, मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता. The order, the arguments, and the consequences. Honestly, I'm more interested in the consequences of this judgment than the intent. But we do have a different reading. I have said, and I still maintain, that the Supreme Court order on some classification of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe is actually a very progressive and muchly needed order. I welcome it, I salute it, not the judges, I salute the judgment. And I think if justice is about ensuring that the least advantaged have first rights over claims, then this judgment serves that cause. And therefore, I support that judgment. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind about it. It so happens that I have some involvement in this case, very marginal. For the last 20 years, I have been involved with a movement in Punjab and Haryana of the Valmiki community. Avinash Pai knows about it. It's Adi Dharm Samaj, but not the old Adi Dharm Samaj that you read about in history. It's a recent movement of the Valmiki community, of mostly Safai Karamcharis. I've been involved with them for now more than 20 years. I now remember more than 20 years because when the 2004 judgment came, they came to me and said, "Ye kya ho gaya hai, sir?" Because as Professor Avinash reminded us, from 1975 onwards, Punjab already had in its rules, in its statutes, a policy that allowed the state to recognize that they were most disadvantaged within the SC. The Punjab policy was not of hard categorization. From what I remember, the Punjab policy was about prioritization. The policy basically said that you have to give first preference to the least advantaged, but if you don't get enough there, then you give it to the rest. In fact, I quite like the policy, and I would finally advocate something of that kind. And then Haryana followed, Bihar had a policy, and finally in Andhra Pradesh, because of the Mala Madika dispute, this policy came in Andhra Pradesh. And when it came in Andhra Pradesh, then it reached the judicial radar. It was brought to the Supreme Court. And in the 2004 judgment, the Chennaiya judgment, the Supreme Court basically said, any state policy that subcategorizes scheduled caste or scheduled tribe is unconstitutional. This was the judgment. So what that judgment did was that it prevented the possibility of any scheme, any sub-quota, any government scheme, which would recognize the existence of differentials within the scheduled caste. This had very serious adverse impact on the condition of Mahadalits, if you want to call them. That's a recent word, the word did not exist then. It had a very serious impact on that. I'm glad Avinash pointed out that actually there is empirical evidence to show that when Punjab practiced their policy of dividing the population into two categories, A and B, as a result, and the basic division in Punjab is Ravidasis, who are muchly advanced, and Valmiki and Majbis, who are substantially behind. That's basically there are lots of castes, but these are the two big chunks. And when that policy was implemented, there is sociological evidence, there is a social scientific evidence, and there is an administrative evidence that the proportion of Valmikis and Majbis, who are the most disadvantaged, it actually improved substantially. So, there was a reality There was a policy. The policy had demonstrated positive impact. And then the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional. For 20 years, all such policies were stopped. They were stopped in Punjab. Punjab tried to do a backdoor version of it, Punjabi backdoor version of it. Obviously, it had to fail because the Supreme Court had a verdict against it. Haryana tried, did not work. There's a Supreme Court verdict. So for 20 years, an injustice has been perpetuated because of a Supreme Court judgment. I call it injustice because the E.V. Chennaiya judgment of 2004 was a super technical judgment. The judgment did not even get into the sociological facts of whether there is heterogeneity in education and jobs or not. The judgment does not even look at the evidence of differentials that exist. The judgment did not get into the fairness or unfairness of it. The judgment took a completely ultra-technical position, and the position was, here is a schedule, that is to say, a list made in the Constitution. The moment you subdivide it into two, you are tinkering with the Constitution, do it through a Constitution amendment, nothing else will come out. It's a super technical judgment. Wrong judgment, because it was a very peculiar reading of Article 341 and 42. So to my mind, what the Supreme Court has done is simply reversed an injustice of 20 years. I said I had something to do with the case because when that happened, then there were attempts were made to, the only way is you go to the courts again. This case has come up again and again in the courts. Started in 2008, came in 2014 when Justice Lodha was the CJI. He said, yes, there's something weird about this judgment, but I can't do anything. Let's form a bench. Then it came in 2020 when Justice Mishra, who I have no reasons to be fond of, Justice Mishra gave a judgment. Again, a strange ultra-technical judgment saying sub-quotas are permissible. But again, it was a very technical judgment. For the first time, but Justice Mishra gave a judgment in favor of sub-quotas, but the problem was that his bench was also a 5-judge bench. So he said, but I cannot overrule, a 5-judge bench cannot overrule a 5-judge bench. Now, a layperson like me says, "Bhaiya, court, ye sun kyun rahe the itne saal se? If you can't give a judgment." But anyway, judges know these things, I don't know. But then 7-member bench was formed. So let us recognize what has happened. A long-standing differential has been addressed. A 20-year-old injustice has been reversed. Please remember, Supreme Court has not said that you will have to have sub-quotas. No, nothing of that kind. Supreme Court has not done the division. The Supreme Court has merely said that if any state government wants to do this sub-quota, then there is no constitutional bar on it. That's all. It's very important to understand these things because we sometimes think, because I hear people saying, why is the judiciary doing what the parliament should be doing or legislatures should be doing? Judiciary is not doing anything of that kind. Judiciary is doing what judiciary should do, namely to interpret the Constitution. And saying, earlier you had said there is a complete bar on it, now they are saying there is no bar. The decision about whether sub-quotas should be done or not still resides with the executive as it should, still resides with legislatures as it should. The court has simply said, yes, if you want, you can do it. What are the arguments for or against? But in one thing, let me begin by underlining one more agreement. I do agree that there is one element of judicial overreach. I don't think the main judgment is judicial overreach at all. But there is one element of judicial overreach that should be rejected, which is the creamy layer thing. The Supreme Court, and then I would like us not to confuse the creamy layer thing with the subdivision part. There are two very different parts to this judgment. The main judgment is on whether scheduled caste can constitutionally be divided into more than one part for purposes of reservation. That's what the main judgment is about. That was the real question before the court. The court said yes. Besides this, the court also has passed remarks. 4 judges have passed remarks on creamy layer. 4 judges have said, just as you have creamy layer in the case of OBC, just as you exclude creamy layer from the benefits of OBC reservation, similarly, you should exclude creamy layer from the benefits of scheduled caste reservations. I beg to disagree on 3 grounds. And on that, I think I'm with both my colleagues completely. Number 1, because actually this was not a case this was not an issue before the court at all. When you have a case in the courts, right in the beginning, the court frames issues and says, these are 3 or 4 questions we are going to answer. Creamy layer was not one of those questions before the court. Suddenly, the judges, in their wisdom, have answered a question that was not posed to them. 4 of them have answered it. The other 3 don't think this question needs to be addressed because it's not in front of them. Justice Chandrachud himself has not addressed this question at all. So that's my first problem with the creamy layer judgment. That why are you answering a question which was not there in the court? Number 2, I do not think, sociologically speaking, we have any evidence of a creamy layer being formed in the scheduled caste. I have probably a difference with many of my colleagues sitting here, because I actually have not objected to creamy layer in the case of OBC. I do believe, and we can debate it, I think there is reasonable sociological and observational evidence to say that you do have creamy layer in some OBC communities. In the case of scheduled caste, it would be completely inappropriate to do so, because to my mind, creamy layer requires 3 things. Number 1, it requires a social status of a kind which is undisputed. सड़क पे जब चलो तो किसी की मजाल नहीं हो कि मेरी तरफ उंगली उठा के दिखाए. That's 1. Second, creamy layer requires ability to intergenerational transfer of that status. सिर्फ मैं नहीं, मेरे खानदान के बारे में कोई उंगली नहीं उठा सकता. That's the second. And third, it requires thick social networks. To my mind, in the case of scheduled caste in India, while you find some families who you could say are creamy layer, but I do not yet see that those isolated drops of cream forming itself into a layer. Just to continue with that metaphor, it's a bad metaphor, I've never liked the word creamy layer, but just to continue with that metaphor, you know, it's those little drops that you find, but not a layer. If you really want to compare, and pardon me for continuing with this metaphor, तो जब चाय पीते हैं ना, तो चाय पी थोड़ा सा ठंडी हो जाती है अगर चाय, तो हल्की सी उसमें झिल्ली सी बन जाती है, जिसे हम उठा के निकाल देते हैं. वो मलाई नहीं होती, वो एक झिल्ली सी है. In the case of scheduled caste, yes, you can find that tiny little film, but to say that a layer has formed, to my mind, is sociologically inappropriate. There is no evidence, unless someone demonstrates this evidence. I don't find that creamy layer. And my third objection is that introducing this thing, incidentally, creamy layer could well form after 25 years. I really hope that it forms, because every community needs it. But don't do it now. Wait for 2 or 3 decades, check it again, and then do it. My third fear is that because of premature introduction of the idea of creamy layer and exclusion of creamy layer from benefits of reservation, the real effect will be that when it comes to upper jobs, class 1 jobs, when you have to appoint a professor in JNU, a professor in, senior doctor in AIMS, someone in IIT, all the eligible applicants will be from the creamy layer. And you actually wouldn't get applicants from outside the creamy, what you are calling creamy layer. So this can become a rouge, this can become a ploy, this can become a conspiracy to actually eliminate reservation altogether from the top sector. That is a very real and genuine fear, and therefore my position is that number one, as I read, we can have different readings of the judgment. My reading is that creamy layer is still not an order of the Supreme Court, but it is potentially a legal weight. 4 judges have said something which can be quoted anytime. So I would like this sub to be taken to the court for review, for the court itself to clarify that this is not an order. And in case the court fails to or refuses to clarify it, I would want the Parliament of India to overrule, to bring a legislation, clarify that creamy layer does not apply in the case of SC or ST, full stop. So there I completely agree with my friends, and much of what has been said. In fact, I find that much of the criticism of this judgment has been on the creamy layer issue, and somehow we have transferred that criticism on the case of the subdivision itself. These are two. So, having said it, now let me come to the main judgment. The main judgment is not about creamy layer, it's a side issue. The main judgment is about subdivision of SC and ST. Why do I think it's a good, it's a muchly needed progressive step? Is the following. Number one is the question of principles. To my mind, there are 2 strong principles for affirmative action, 2 routes through which you defend affirmative action. One is fairness, the other is representation. The fairness principle, if you go to John Rawls, in case you have any interest in those things, is about putting the least advantaged first. So if the principle is about least advantage to be put first, or if you don't like John Rawls, if you like Mahatma Gandhi's vocabulary, कल्पना कीजिए कि आप जिंदगी में सबसे कमजोर किस व्यक्ति को मिले हैं और सोचिए कि इस नीति से उसे फायदा होगा या नहीं. ताबीज, this is Gandhi's ताबीज. They're actually the same. I really cannot think of any group which would be, I mean there is one, but I'll talk about that later. If we see of Indian society as hierarchy, inequality within inequality, those who are placed at the bottom of this hierarchy are going to benefit from the Supreme Court judgment. And for me, that logic trumps everything else. It works for the least advantaged. That's a moral argument, fairness argument. Second is a representational argument, which is to say, which is politics of presence, that any government, any legitimate government must reflect the profile of the society in which it exists. That actually is the argument behind SC/ST reservation in parliament and legislatures. Now, if that argument applies in the case of SC and ST, and if you ask my Valmiki friends from Punjab and Haryana, if you ask Madigas from Karnataka and Andhra, if you ask Arundhatiyars from Tamil Nadu, they would tell you, what have we got out of these MPs and MLAs? We are not there. This is a fact. No one can deny it. If anyone wants to contest, please tell me. The fact is that there has been absolute minuscule representation of all these communities within the SC/ST reservation. They have a grouch, they have a grudge, there is a deficiency. They want it on this absolutely the same argument on which we claim SC/ST reservations. So both on grounds of fairness and on grounds of representation, I think the case for sub-quota is justified. Come to the legal part. So on grounds of principle, on grounds of law. On grounds of law, I've already clarified that Supreme Court has not, in judging the question of sub-quota, there is no judicial outreach. There is overreach. There is overreach in the case of creamy layer issue. Sub-quota is absolutely what judges ought to be deciding. I do not think there is an overreach. Secondly, to argue that Article 341 and Article 342 postulate a homogeneous category that cannot be tinkered with is just bad argument. Just show me in the law. Where does it say so? All that it says is the President of India shall, create this schedule. It does not say you cannot, changing the schedule is different. And yes, if you want to insert a new caste, then you have to go to the parliament. And of course, if you want to create quota within SC or ST for purposes of central government jobs or for purposes of JNU, you have to go to the parliament. But if in order to do it in Bihar, if Bihar government wants to see that its own, that for jobs and educational opportunities within Bihar, if they see that their own SCs belong to two different categories, then I don't see how does it violate the constitution. बिल्कुल वो तो बाल की खाल उधेड़ दी हो तब तो हो सकता है argument. Otherwise, I really don't see the argument there. Just read the plain text of the constitution. Third is an empirical argument, which Harish Bhai alluded to. Where is the evidence? In fact, that's been asked again and again. In the last week or so, many scholars have said, Professor Ashwini Deshpande has also written to say, good decision, but how would you implement? Where is the evidence? Frankly, I'm actually surprised. The evidence is right under our nose. And I'm not speaking of observational evidence. I'm not speaking of those things. वैसे तो आप घूम लीजिए, आपको सब पता होगा. मैं बिना कुछ जाने JNU के बारे में दावा कर सकता हूँ कि JNU में SC कोटा से जितने भी स्टूडेंट्स का एडमिशन हुआ होगा, उसमें से इन कैटेगरीज के लोग 20% भी नहीं होंगे. 1/5 of the quota would be taken by them. 3/4 of the quota would be taken by other communities. Why do I say so? Because there is census evidence. I'm absolutely surprised that in this country you have public debate which does not cite the most obvious public data, namely the census of India. Many people have said, जब तक caste census नहीं होगा, तब तक हमें कैसे पता लगेगा? The simple fact is, because they are social scientists, I really want all of you to know. Yes, there is no caste census of India for all the caste and communities. Precisely because of that, people like me are advocating it, demanding it. But please remember, a full caste census always takes place for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe. And the data has always been available for the last 70 years. Today's Hindu, please read the Hindu of today. On the op-ed page, there is a data point, an article by my former colleague Sanjeev Alam, that simply presents the data for 5 states. And just notice the shocking inequalities within that. So, from the census of India, we not only know the population size of different jatis within SC, we also know their educational status. We know how many of them are agricultural labor. All this data is available. And the data is shocking. I'll just give you an evidence from Punjab, it was referred to. So if we look at Punjab, and this is from 2011 census, there are, in Punjab, the broad division is Ravidasis, which is the name for leather working communities in Punjab. Ravidasis, Jatavs, that's the name. In Punjab, if you look at the proportion of graduates within Ravidasis, per 10,000. I'm using per 10,000 because it saves the trouble of decimal percentage thing. So per 10,000 population among Ravidasis, the number of graduates is 305, which is to say 3.05%. What is the percentage among Valmikis, the Safai Karamcharis? 126, 1.26. How much is the difference? दुगने से ज़्यादा फर्क, आधे से कम है उनका. Don't stop here. Take one more step because you've studied them. Majbis. What is the proportion among Majbis? 61, 0.61%. Compare, now this is scheduled caste within one state. We are not even comparing them to Maharashtra. Scheduled caste within one small state of Punjab, which is one of the small states of India. Look at the difference, 305 versus 61. What is the ratio? 1:5. If this is not inequality, tell me what is inequality? If this is not evidence, what is evidence? This is Census of India evidence, which is not used, which is not cited, which is not talked about. And if you want to be shocked further, come to Bihar. What is the proportion, the same proportion, per 10,000 population? How many graduates do you have among Bhuiyas and Musahas? 5. 5 out of 10,000. 0.05%. And there are communities in Maharashtra where the number is 900 plus. Is this not inequality? Does it look like a homogeneous community? Does it look like absence of evidence to you? Just think about it. No, the question of homogeneity is a bad question. Are JNU students homogeneous? You would say, of course not. Step outside JNU, everyone in the world believes all the JNU students are homogeneous, they are Naxals, they are Dadi, they are this, they are anti-nationalists. You of course laugh at it because they see it from outside, you see it from within. Homogeneity or lack of homogeneity is not a function of what exists outside. It's a function of what question do we ask. Are Dalits homogeneous? Yes, they are homogeneous in one respect, that they've all suffered one of the grossest injustice of caste system. Almost all of them, all the scheduled castes have suffered from untouchability. Not all, but almost all. So yes, they are homogeneous in that respect. But in this issue, my question is, are they homogeneous in their educational and job opportunities? That's my question, because I'm looking at reservations. In this, though, there has to be a relevant consideration. Asking, are Indians homogeneous? Well, when they live in the US, they look quite homogeneous. Are they homogeneous? They are not. So, the question should be homogeneous in which respect and in what context? In the context of educational opportunities and job opportunities, there is absolutely pakka evidence that there is nothing like homogeneity there. It is an inequality which is crying to be attended. If I speak somewhat passionately, the passion does not come from tables or from census or from my politics. It comes from 20 years of having watched Valmiki community of Haryana and Punjab, and having seen what exists on the ground, and having seen how they have been systematically denied opportunities. This needs to be addressed. I cannot imagine how a defender of social justice like my friends here would not wish to address this. Finally, the political question. Is it a ploy to divide Dalits? It's a conspiracy to divide Dalits. I would be careful before I use these arguments, because I would remember how Baba Sahib was attacked during the national movement. when Dr. Ambedkar asked this question, which was a very uncomfortable question at that time, of the situation of the depressed classes as they were called then, or the untouchables as he called them. What was the response of the national movement? Divide कर रहे हो. अरे हम अंग्रेजों के साथ लड़ रहे हैं, तुम आके divide कर रहे हो, खेल खेल रहे हो. What is the argument that we hear? I mean, for me, it's what 40 years of defending reservations now. When I was a student in this university, I came under the influence of, at that time, Ambedkar was not the thing in this university. To tell you the most shameful fact, in the course of modern Indian political thought, Ambedkar was not taught. So I've grown up in that generation. But I learned it from Lohia. And then I learned caste and reservations. For 40 years, I have defended reservations. And what is the argument that I have heard again and again from those who attack reservations? यार ये डिवाइड करने वाली बातें क्यों कर रहे हो? Division is the moment someone asks for justice, the first accusation is division. This is what blacks in the US have been accused of. This is what Dalits in India have faced. I would really say, please think twice before you want to use this argument. मैं अपने दोस्तों से कहना चाहता हूँ यार 40 साल से जिस आर्ग्यूमेंट को हम नकार रहे हैं, and what has been my response? My response has been there is no unity without justice. Any unity which is based on shoving under the carpet questions of deep injustice is no unity. And my argument has been, for me, unity is not a small thing. Unity is a very important thing for India, for Haryana, for Dalits, for everyone. Unity is an important consideration. But true unity is born out of solidarity. It is not born out of brushing inconvenient questions under the carpet. Remember, the feminists of this world have always faced this accusation. घर तोड़ रही हो? ये सवाल, ये लैंग्वेज हम यूज करना बंद कर दें. बहुत सुन लिए हमने लैंग्वेज. घर तोड़ रहे हो, ये कर रहे हो, डिविजन कर रहे हो. इंसाफ के सवाल का सीधा जवाब दो. आए बाएं करके मुझे जवाब मत दो. So, I don't think it's a good answer. Solidarity is what I want. What would be the best way? Yes, the prospect of Dalit division worries me. Before coming here, and the reason why I got delayed was that I was in a meeting organized by Valmiki Samaj and Khatik Samaj, and they had organized a meeting in Delhi. And having told them about the judgment, my one appeal was that you have put Baba Saheb's picture in this room. Please do not cause a situation where Baba Saheb may have to cry and see that his children fighting with each other on the street. मैंने कहा कुछ भी हो जाए, लड़िए मत. Yes, we need solidarity. I understand solidarity. I understand the value. But solidarity comes when those who are in a relatively advantageous position stand up and say, it's your turn, let me get up. That is when solidarity begins. Mayawati ji, who has trashed this judgment, आप जरा सोचिए. Mayawati ji, politics I don't agree at all, I must confess. But she's an icon nevertheless. My liking or dislike doesn't make a difference. She's an icon. For millions and millions, she's an icon. अगर मायावती जी ये कह देती कि नहीं, उत्तर प्रदेश में जाटव समाज को थोड़ा ज्यादा फायदा मिला है, अब वाल्मीकि समाज की बारी है, मैं उनके लिए एडवोकेट करूंगी, that would have created solidarity. You know, that is the kind of things we need. So please do not put the onus of unity on those who have suffered injustice. It's bad argument. Let's just stop using it. Finally, 2 or 3 things very quickly. There is a sense I would not get into the question of what is the overall character of Supreme Court of India and Indian judiciary. For me, a judiciary that cannot attend to Umar Khalid for 3 years, I don't need to hear very much about that then. So it's not about whether Indian judiciary is good or bad, what is his character, we all know that. I'm interested in one judgment and its consequences. I should also incidentally say that in the otherwise very mixed record of Indian judiciary on questions of human rights, on questions of justice and equality, Indian judiciary's support for caste-based reservation is actually an exceptional thing of Indian judiciary. If you compare Indian judiciary, for example, to the judiciary in the US, judiciary in the US has been obnoxious on this question. They have consistently prevented any serious affirmative action to take place. Indian judiciary, on the other hand, has some stellar judgment, and then Thomas, great judgment. Even Indira Sahni, I thought, was a great judgment on balance. So, to my mind, one of the biggest exceptions was the EWS judgment, which is a judgment waiting to be reviewed. That judgment flies in the face of the logic of reservations. But if you actually read this judgment, and I read it, in fact, Justice Chandrachud for the first time is taking arguments of affirmative action one step further. You have an advocacy of substantive equality, something which is implicit in the N.M. Thomas judgment. Justice Chandrachud actually takes that one step forward. And in this judgment, you have, to my mind, the best defense so far of reservations against the argument of merit and efficiency. To my mind, this particular judgment is the best defense of reservations that has come in this particular count. So to say that it's an anti-reservation judgment, I don't know. Please show me the text. Yes, I know Justice Mittal has said a few things which seem to belong to a different age and time, but that's not the judgment of the court. That's not a judgment of 6 judges. Even Justice Bela Trivedi, whose track record on other things has been questioned, who has disagreed with this judgment, even her judgment does not show any streak of any anti-caste reservation in the judgment. I could be wrong, it's a very fat and long judgment, but please enlighten me, show me paragraphs of that judgment which actually go against. I've spoken for long. I would just say one thing and end what I'm saying. You know, there's something that affects all of us, and this is my plea to my friends. As I said, I've been in this for 40 years. I know the arguments that have been used against reservations. I know the kind of mentality that has worked against social justice and reservation. In this place, I can get away with these arguments, but I know if I were to be in another institution, what kind of reactions would I get for my advocacy of reservation, for my advocacy of caste, census, and so on. I would say, it's my appeal, forget all the arguments. It's my appeal to all those who have stood for social justice. This is a moment of test. I'm a Yadav, and when I say OBC reservations are great, most people think, "Arey Yadav hai, aisa hi bolega hi." They believe, erroneously so, that I must have got into JNU and on OBC quota. There was none at that time. They believe, erroneously so, that my children must be benefiting from OBC reservations. They don't and they cannot because creamy layer provision applies, thankfully. But the impression is, okay, this man speaks for reservation. There is, well, I can see why. I know his name. What is the real test? Whether I stand for people who share my accident of birth, people from my own caste, or do I stand for social justice? That is tested when instances of oppression against Dalit, violence against Dalit comes from UP. And you know the caste which is involved most in any instances of oppression against Dalits. What does Yogendra Yadav say then is the test of whether he stands for social justice or whether he stands for his own community. I would simply say, I may succeed in that test, I may fail in that test, but I do not want my Ambedkarite friends to fail that test. This is a moment of test. गाड़ी में घुसने के बाद सबकी इच्छा होती है, जब घुसते हैं तब हमारी एक मनस्थिति होती है ना, खोल खोल दरवाजा, क्यों नहीं, सबकी है, पब्लिक की ट्रेन है, तेरे बाप की है क्या? और पता नहीं क्यों डब्बे के अंदर जाते ही हमें कुछ अलग दिखने लगता है कि बहुत क्राउड हो गया, how can we take more? This happens all over the world. This happens with everyone. And the real test of whether you stand for a principle or not is what you do when you are inside, not what the big things that you say when you are outside. This is a test for all of us. The real test, and this test does not apply only in this case. जब मैं अभी आज शाम को उनके साथ बात करके आया हूँ, तो मैंने उनको भी कहा कि आपका टेस्ट ये होगा कि जब घर में जाके औरत के साथ जो होता है, उसके बारे में जब कोई बोलेगा तो आप उसकी बात सुनेंगे कि नहीं सुनेंगे? There is no one in this world जिसके नीचे कोई नहीं है, social hierarchy. How you relate to those below you is a test of whether you stand for social justice or not. This is a moment of reckoning. This is a moment of test. I do not want us to fail. I do not want the world to laugh at those who spoke for social justice. I want true solidarity. Solidarity which is born out of working together, sharing grief. दर्द के दर्द से दर्द का रिश्ता बनाने से सच्ची एकता बनती है. I want to see that. Thank you very much.